and welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Saturday, July 14th, 7 o'clock here in Buffalo, New York. Joined tonight by Henrik, the Danish Grand Solar Minimum channel. Henrik, how you doing tonight, bud?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. I got a couple things interesting to talk about in the headlines. Thanks to Robert Felix on his website. I only saw a few relevant things really to talk about that's going current in the news. I want to touch base with Yellowstone as well, and also some SST information. But first, I'll go ahead and start with our space weather news part of the broadcast, and go ahead and check it out. Solar wind speeds are holding steady at 451.8 kilometers per second with a 2.6 density. Guess what? We have now tied 2017 spotless days of 104 on day July 14th, 2018, with a stretch right now of 17 days without any sunspots on the sun. And looking at the SDO, we will also see that we don't see anything on the horizon as well. KP indice is at 1, while the max has been at 2. And I think suspicious observers had said be on a quake watch. So normally when he speaks on those things, he's pretty good about when we do see a 7.0 or higher event. Usually he's right within that 7 to 10 day window. So we will also kind of keep an eye on that as well. And here is that quiet sun I was talking about. And looking at the end of this loop here on the eastern limb, we still don't see any real significant action coming over on the eastern limb. That white spot there is a phenomena called facula, and it has no dark cores. So actually they thought that this was capable of producing dark cores and turn into a sunspot, but that hasn't happened. So all has been quiet on the sun thus far. And also taking a look at our TSI, pardon me. We've got ratings right now that are hovering in the 1360.6670 range. Again, that number is 1360.660 as of July 2nd. Hold the phones, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes this happens. Okay. That was actually July the 8th. July 6th. We'll try it again. Again, I have diabetes eyes, so it's hard for me to see these numbers sometimes. Poor Henrik. I can only imagine how hard it is to see on your device.
I'm not looking right now. I have closed my eyes.
He's just listening. He's blind right now, by the way. So he's just. I'm trying to paint the picture for him. Let's just say the TSI is holding steady there, Henrik. Not up, not down. Just staying where it needs to stay. And here's the article I was talking about. Thanks to Robert Felix, he posted this on the 14th, and here is his attempt to paraphrase the Italian website article. But this basically, they are admitting that solar cycles are now tied to cooling, and this is huge. And the Italian meteorology group, they should, after all the record snow they've seen in the Alps and in that region, they should believe in this stuff here. But it says here the sun appears usually tired because sunspots on the surface are not visible and seems destined to remain rather low for the next few days. This continues a trend since the beginning of 2018 because there have already been 108 days this year without stains. I think they meant sunspots. And right now we're at 104. That makes us reflect because 2017, again, a discrepancy with a number. I think they meant 104 was the number that we had last year. Should we be concerned? Well, scholars say there is a close correlation between solar activity and our climate, and often on sun could have quite the negative repercussions. This is not a fantasy, as it's happened in the past. Between 1645 and 1715, our planet lived through what was called the Maunder minimum, named after Edward Maunder, a British astronomer. During the Maunder minimum, the average global temperature dropped by 1.5 degrees Celsius. And it was precisely in those years that Europe endured the harshest winters in memory. In 1709, the port of Genoa froze, and they list other things that also had frozen over. But, you know, I'm glad he pointed this article out, and the link's here for the actual article. You can translate it yourself right here at the bottom. But what's interesting is that now the mainstream in Italy, and let's hope that's mainstream for their sake, is they are talking about moderate minimum and what's happened before. So what I was going to ask you, Henrik, is that so far we've seen 104 spotless days in 2017. And from what we saw last year, we had 104 for the total year, but we saw some pretty historic stuff, record-breaking cold, floods, stuff of that nature. But in my opinion, there's been a lot of flooding in the United States. I know right now you guys are going through a bit of a drought, but worldwide, I've seen a lot of increasing of flooding and hail accumulations like no other. But it almost seems like it happens in waves. Like on this side of the world, it's intense for a couple of months, and then it comes back to the U.S. Canadian part of the world, and then it swings back over to the Europe part. Right now, in my opinion, it seems that the European countries and others over in that region, Africa and others in the Middle East experiencing heat, it seems like that's where all the extreme weather is right now. While right now the U.S. is just kind of sitting on idle. But I guess what I'm saying is we've seen the sunspots go lower than this. It's not that we should be worried about 1 year of low sunspots. It's what we think is going to happen in the coming years, future-wise. So do you think it gets a little blown out of proportion sometimes when we talk about how many days of spotless days we've had for this year?
No, absolutely not. I think it's good we are keeping an eye on that. But I also have to say that there is also very much rain in India right now, and still in Oman there is very much rain and hail and floods. So it's like those area, it's staying a little bit and come back, and then of course we have Japan, uh, which I can totally not come over, because I think it was so crazy what was happening in Japan. But I think that next year will be even less spotless, because we are going that way, I think, when we're talking sunspots.
Well, and just looking at previous models for solar cycles, we know how when they exit out of one, you're in the minimum for a couple of years. As it starts to increase in solar activity, before it peaks out and heads back to another minimum. Now, you're right. Next year will be worse, and a lot of people who follow this content have spoke a lot about how fast this is going to happen. And I wanted to show everybody a scale real quick here, a graph that kind of puts things. I think it's in this one. Yes, it is. All right. So this one right here, we see the cycles. Every 100 years it peaks, and then it falls to a record low, and then it shoots way back up and then starts to decline. You get your double peak there. But here's the thing. Each time we've seen a peak in this graph, it does not drop off sharply as some of these people would like for you to believe right now. And right now we are at the downward spiral of this peak that's declining. So if you look back throughout time and previous minimums and climate cycles, each time we've had a huge amount in a spike or a peak, we always fall down. We don't fall straight down. We fall down. There's, in my opinion, looking at this right here, it took 100 years for temperatures to plummet out to the bottom or more, and then increased a lot quicker. But again, on the declining part of it, it took several years. It seems like a dozen years to warm all the way up, and then several decades for it to cool all the way down. So for us to be at the beginning of this declination period of our climate, it is going to get worse, because we haven't seen these kind of drops in anything in a long, long time. So we've had a warming period. We're at a max. Now we're coming over that hill on the roller coaster. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, it looks like, to me anyway, I could be wrong, but it looks like after every peak, there really isn't a whole lot of area where there's a huge sharp decline. The last couple of times, once we've seen the peaks, there hasn't been a sharp, except if you go back 400 plus years, then you do see kind of a sharp decline, a quick increase around the 450-year mark, and then you see it from the 500-year mark down to the within 400 years. So within 100 years, we did see it drop kind of quick there, but still, nonetheless, this type of event, this cooling that we're heading into, this next grand solar minimum, is going to take some time. So tonight, I think this chart goes around with what we want to try to offer, and that's a little insight. We want to offer solutions. We want to talk about the possibilities and the problems that we could face, not just climate related with the grand solar minimum, but other things that go along with solar activity and lack thereof. I'll leave the link in the description because this article here, actually, I do recommend everyone to read this. But you had something to add to that there, Henrik?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Even if there is natural cycles, as we know there is, and no matter what, then there will not be two cycles that will be the same. You know, there will always be changes, and a lot of changes from cycles to cycle. Even if this is a cycle that is similar to something else, you know, then it will still be different, you know.
Very
So
true.
I just mean, you know, it would be so difficult to predict anything.
You're right, and all we have to base it off of is historic information. You're right though. No two pattern here matches. They don't all fall in the same patterns. So that's again, this is why I have you on this show, Henrik. This is why we associate with so many others in the community. It's good to have more than one set of eyes looking at this, because my perception was of a possibility of a pattern repeat, but yet you do bring up a really good point here that there really is no such thing as a pattern repeat in these climate cycles. So I guess I'm hoping that we get some sort of a repeat from the last change that we saw versus some of these other changes where it looks like they kind of happened a little quicker than usual. But before we move on to I found
cheers, everybody.
Yeah. I had a couple of articles tonight talking about EMPs and stuff like that. But before we move into that, I want to address something. I'm not saying this is fake news or anything of that nature. I'm just saying I think it deserves a little more research. And I'm talking about the situation at the Grand Teton National Park. Now, I've got 3 articles here. They all say, well, 2 of the 3 say the same things. And from what I'm reading, there's nothing in here that talks about any kind of connection with Yellowstone. Now, the first thing people are going to yell at me is that, you know, well, yeah, if you want to believe that shill, go ahead and keep preaching your shill. They're not going to tell the truth right in front of you in mainstream media. But I just, you know, that may be true as well. But I've heard reports that this was a 125-foot long fissure. I have not seen any information on that. The only place that I see this topic running rampant right now is on YouTube. And I'm not going to name channels. That is their job, to attract viewers to their channel. However, I think it's causing a little bit of panic where it shouldn't be. And this article I found was from November 6th of 2015, where we've seen a crack that was almost 2,200 feet long and 148 feet wide in this same area. And there's, you know, however, although anonymous to look at, the experts say nothing sinister about it, and it doesn't portend an eruption at Yellowstone or some other disaster. So this was from 2015. This article did not lie. because we saw a 2,200 long fissure crack, 150 feet wide, and what was reported in mainstream was actually true. This did not show anything that would make scientists worry about a potential eruption in the Yellowstone, and nothing happened. Now, I've also seen articles and people talking about how many geyser explosions that we've had in the last several months, and I think it's somewhere around 11 or 12 in the last 10 months or something like that. And in the last 28 years, we've only seen 10. Again, I think that we get caught up, we get excited. There was a lot of hysteria made about these hurricanes that were forming in the Atlantic Ocean. A lot of big hype. They didn't come anywhere close to the country. They made a little bit of beach erosion, and that's it. And now we are dealing with Yellowstone mania, where I've seen all over YouTube where them closing down a park in that region was for safety reasons, and it was because they are worried about falling rock. It has nothing to do with park officials are searching for a Park Service expert to assess the risk of potentially unstable rock wall. In this article here, it also talks about a rock wall. Human safety is our number one priority, and with the abundance of caution, we are temporarily closing this area until we can properly assess the situation. Those familiar with the site, specifically park rangers and personnel, identified the cracks and fissures as determined the situation to be a possible safety hazard. Notable changes in the rock over the past 24 hours sparked rangers implement temporary closures and initiate risk assessments. But things around it, like the lake, you can still access the lake around the area. There's also other things that you can still enjoy, but there's just one particular area where they're worried about falling rock. So it always, and it's kind of been the motto here at Grand Solar Minimum, do your own research. We provide articles that we feel are relevant to the current situation, and then take the link and do what you got to do. Search it in Google, see what else you can find that goes along with that. And that's how you come up with a determination, instead of seeing all these overhyped headline videos out there that maybe they're onto something, but maybe not. I still need a little bit more proof. I see a lot of these videos on YouTube, and there's no links in the description, but there's links to their PayPals. So I know you guys are the same way. You'd like to see a link, a story, a paper, a PDF, something that states, how is this connected to Yellowstone? Why do you think that? Why are you giving this alert? One channel just blatantly pretty much said Yellowstone with the fissure crack, when Yellowstone has nothing to do with it at this point. And I'm not saying that it's not possible that a situation could arise, but again, let's not get too overworked up about something that's happened before. And according to one channel, if it's only 120 feet long, just think about how scary this 2,300 foot long fissure was back in 2015. That was 150 feet wide. Have you seen anything about this on the internet, Henrik, about this possible situation at Yellowstone?
Yes, multiple, especially on YouTube, but I don't believe it, because it's like if they knew something will happen, they would evacuate people or enclose certain areas. It's not like people in Hawaii when the volcano blow up. People said no, stay, nothing is happening. Of course, if anything will happen, they will tell us.
Well, then you've got the crazy nut jobs out there that believe that our governments around the world are going to depopulate the world. And I've seen many rumored things about Yellowstone being said population control tool number one. But,
yeah, I don't buy that.
I mean, how could you even possibly say that? We don't even know if Yellowstone will ever blow again in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime or ever. It could go tomorrow, but I don't think anyone is comfortable with speaking to how soon, and just connecting the dots to something that's just not there yet.
I think people love fear, you know. I don't know why, but so many people are making, you know, fearmonger movies about everything, you know. And sometimes I'm just thinking, you know, why? Why are they doing it, you know?
Well, we know why they're doing it, and I think a lot of folks
Yeah,
don't.
okay.
A lot of folks don't want to believe it, but there are things out there that that may look like something that you would like or something that you would follow agenda wise, but really, if you peel that onion a few layers back, you'll see that it's black and stinky. And now I sound like Wayne Steiger here with my one-liners here, but it's true. We've learned so much being on YouTube and trying to use this as a platform to get out the grand solar minimum message. And when you think you have other like-minded channels out there, and you really don't, you find out their ulterior motive is hidden. It's like the wolf in sheep's clothing. And I see so much of it. I see so much misinformation out there. It doesn't matter what the topic is. There's misinformation, and it's just sad. You have people on a daily basis that will write to us asking about the best one I got today was are the solar winds at negative right now? Apparently, there's a channel out there that reported that they caught the solar winds at a negative 485 kilometers per second. And it, to me, like, you can say, well, simply that person is just not aware of how the solar wind and everything works. But would you believe it that they claim to be a science and news technology channel in the first place? So to make outlandish claims like that, and what was hilarious is this was just a simple mistake in reading a graph. There were dashes next to the 100, the 200, the 300, the 400, the 500, 6, 7, 8, etc., where it shows you how many kilometers per second. So he took it as that it was a negative 485 and not just a dash that was separating each individual speed. Um, you know, pretty bonehead, an embarrassing mistake. But like I said, this guy also claims to be a NASA science channel. But again, it's bad enough that we have global warmists who harass people about you're a climate denier. Henrik's a climate denier. You don't care about the planet, Henrik, because you don't believe that CO2 is a pollutant. So you are accused of being a climate denier and a person who wants to murder people. And then you got people that's supposed to be on the same team that are just blunt and obviously doing this for personal gain. I'm not going to get into it today. I've got a few things that I would like to present to you folks one day that some of these other people out there who are just absolutely rude and disrespectful to the people who sub. By the way, people on YouTube are not obligated to continue to come back and watch videos on these channels. That's up to the channel creator to create the interest for you to come back. And the mentality somehow has gotten lost where it's not for the subs anymore. It's become more entertainment or personal gain for some of these channel creators. And, you know, listen, as much as I wear my heart on my sleeve, but I listen to you guys out there. I don't let you run the show, but when I hear too many people bitching about politics, I back off a little bit. I hit the brakes. I try to cut down the politics stories in GSM. I've also had a lot of support for people who say, no, don't apologize for that. Don't cut that back because you can't help it. And they're right too. You can't help the GSM topic and then getting political about it. It's almost hand in hand, unfortunately. But my point is that I hope that this channel, it does something for you guys more than just point you in the right direction. But we try to be reasonable with everybody. We want to be fair. And I think it's important that not only do we do the work, but our subs as well. It's important we do the work together because, again, this channel, we are reporting on the grand solar minimum. I've never came out here and discussed my PhD in geology or anything like that. I don't have that. I'm reporting on this topic because I'm passionate about the climate. I'm passionate about what's happening to our planet. And this is where I've been led, was down this road. And it makes the most sense to me out of everything that I've ever been taught in school or ever been told in the past. Solar cycles, ENSO. I don't know about you, Henrik, but it all makes sense to me. It's not a head scratcher, but it is technical.
Yeah, that depends on how technical you will be. But I also learned in school that cycles are cycles and very natural.
We weren't
And,
even.
and that goes from everything in history. If you will say it roughly, there are so many things. There are cycles.
I just wish school would have taught us a little bit about these. I don't remember hearing about solar minimum, solar maximum, sunspots, coronal holes, CMEs, EMPs. I really don't remember. And I enjoyed science and math as a kid. Not so much as a high schooler, but as a kid, I was really into science and math. So my school, I don't remember anything about Maunder minimums or anything like that.
Well, then you gotta go back to the books.
Pretty much. Rob jokes around with me about he sends Mari a lot of the papers, and I call her my translator because she crunches the paper first and makes sense of it and kind of feeds it to me like a baby bird. I know I'm the baby bird. She's the mama bird. She chews it up and spits it in my mouth for me. So, but that's the truth. I mean, we're learning together, and Mari's a smart person. She's college educated. So, for her to be here for me to help break these down. And then I got people like you and Rob and Starman and then Penelope. And then we had another gentleman, a new subscriber who's kind of followed other channels, but really has kind of dedicated his time more to us than the other channels as well. Also, Mohammed from Jordan. I appreciate your support. This guy, all he cares about is people understanding that we are cooling. And it's just great to see people from all over the world who are starting to join this effort. I got you in Denmark. We got Mohammed Hadi in Jordan. You got Starman in the UK. And then, of course, people throughout Australia. We recently have touched base with a lot of people from Australia lately as well. So the word's getting out. The platform's getting bigger. And the hope is that these people discover our channel through all the other BS that's out there, the sensationalist headlines, and because those are a lot more juicier channels when you've got people making sound effects and one-line jokes and laughing at everything and disrespecting law enforcement. I mean, that's easy to do, incite hate. But what we want to do here is try to encourage learning and understanding and patience and tolerance. I know that sounds ridiculous because the global warmists have none of that for us, but we have to be the bigger people here. We have to express patience and tolerance for these people because our theories are foreign to 90% of anybody in the world that knows anything about climate. It's just not caught on yet. It's growing. There are a lot more grand solar minimum channels out there today, Henrik, than there was last year at this time. Big time.
Yeah, I found one today. I didn't found before, and all us we are learning too every day. Every time we are reading a new article, you are learning something.
Yeah, and I think also with minimum, the information that keeps coming out, we keep revealing more pieces to the puzzle. It's not as simple as one thought. Before it was, well, it's the Milankovitch cycle mixed with the grand solar minimum glaciation period. But what's not being explained out there, and Ralph Whitjay was the one that kind of broke it down for us. He was the first person that we talked to out of all of our interviews that talk about Milankovitch cycles, and that it takes a full 100,000 years to see it full circle. It's not an instant glaciation type thing. This happens over 100,000 year period. So again, we were learning because we were told before that this is going to make things really, really bad in 2024, where there's a certain planetary alignment with Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and Earth will be in this type of gravitational tug from these four gas giants that's going to pull away Earth from the sun just by a little bit. But again, this is not something that's going to be overnight. And there's a lot of other factors that are pointing at a deep solar minimum without that aspect of this. So I guess I'm just trying to say is we're trying to take as much time as we can with the information that we have. And there might be nights where I sound like a broken record, but you know, it's kind of like when the coach of a baseball or football or basketball team installs the puke play. And what's the puke play? It's the play that you run in practice over and over and over and over again until you're puking. But you know the play because you did it so many times it made you puke. You'll never forget that play. And I don't want to make anyone puke by any means, but you get the point. You know, we want to be able to say a certain word and people automatically, a light bulb goes off and they know what to think, or be a little bit quicker or sharper thinker when it comes to prepping and future stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead and get to that. Oh, one more thing before I get into the meat of this topic tonight. We noticed, take a look at that. Do you know what that is? Oh, you can't see this, Henrik. All right, so what I'm showing is the North Atlantic SST anomaly. And right now we just have a dot that shows us that the temperature for July 14th is negative 0.731. But if you notice on this, there is nothing before this. It's almost like this was looking bad for people who are a part of this global warming phenomena. So let's wipe out the data and start it over, because surely at this point of the summer, July, in the Northern Hemisphere now, we will start to see the waters heat up. And now this new data that is going to be shown to everybody is going to basically glorify this incline that we are due to get in the North Atlantic SST right now. I want to believe that things like this are accidents, that somebody made a mistake and accidentally scrubbed all the data for the North Atlantic. But I want to go into this real quick too, and then Henrik will get into the meat of this. But quickly, checking out other graphs, all right? Let's take a look at the Atlantic MDR. Same thing. Everything's wiped out. Let's check out one more. How about Caribbean? Look at that. Again, we don't see the past data that has shown that the Caribbean has been very erratic of sudden cooling, sudden warming, up and down the last couple weeks. Before that, it was cooler than what it should have been. That's for sure. But according to this chart, it's at above baseline, 0.02, but it's above baseline, right? One more here. I want to show the global. Me and Rob were talking about this before I went on tonight. Again, we don't see the lines that show the struggle of these temps to stay above baseline. We just see today's dot. So I'm hoping that I hear from Starman soon, and he tells me that this is typical. They just go through and they wipe out even this. Look at the 7-day SST anomaly. Nothing. So today, tomorrow, there should be, I guess in the next 6 days, we'll see something. But this is completely blank. So I'm hoping there was some kind of software corrupt file that erased everything. They've got it backed up, I'm sure. I tweeted out earlier today, I'm glad I was paying attention to these SSTs on the show, because right now, at least you'll be able to at least archive the North Atlantic SST for the last 3 weeks or so. I have covered that very extensively. But I also found it interesting that on the North Atlantic, before this data was erased, the lowest value on this chart was a negative 1.0. And now they've upped that to a negative 0.8, which, by the way, yesterday it was sitting at a negative 0.692. and today it dropped 0.04 on the values for the temperature. So how does that make you feel, Henrik, when you hear about stuff like this where data is being scrubbed? So now when you're trying to supposedly be transparent about this and you go to your typical tropical tidbits handy dandy little tool here, but yet you don't have the previous information to compare it to.
Well, that's nothing new, you know. So I don't really know what to say about it. I'm not surprised, you know, but it would be more and more difficult for, I think, for them to hide all those results that are coming up, you know. They cannot lie to the public all the time, because somebody will have to see the truth, you know, you and I and a lot of others. So I think it would be very difficult in the future for them to lie.
Well, and you know, a lot more people are calling for transparency in the EPA. So the EPA is saying, yeah, we're going to show you transparency. We're going to show you the data, the science. So you feel good about the administration that's in charge here in the United States about looking at scientific data a whole new way now. But then shortly after these announcements today, and like I said, I hope this was a mistake. This could be just a glitch. Tomorrow, all this could be back, and I've overreacted, but it's just a little odd. It almost makes me wonder if this part of their site is getting too much attention from a lot of amateurs, and it's just picking up too much attention, and they don't want people worried about it. They're trying to out of sight, out of mind by wiping out previous data and starting from here. Like I said, it's only going to go up these next few weeks. It should, anyway. It should. But getting back to the meat of the topic tonight, I found a website here, Backdoor Survival, prepping for an EMP and solar flares, how to prepare for electromagnetic pulse. And it briefly talks about what is an EMP, life after EMP. And here's some of the questions, Henrik, that, you know, they propose here. What if your power went out and never came back on? Could you fend for yourself? That's protection is number one. And let's just say, for the sake of doing a questionnaire, Henrik, just go ahead and answer these questions for me. If the power went off and never came back on, could you fend for yourself right now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But not for long.
Could you keep yourself warm in the winter and cool in the summer?
Yes.
Where would you find food?
Well, I can hunt. I would not love to, but I can.
What would you use for money if credit cards and ATMs are no longer working?
My cannabis.
Now, this is the best part about having you on the show, is that the reason why you're so keen on the topic and your answers are, you know, people can say, oh, this is cheating. You know, of course, Henrik is ready. But it's my point. The point of these questions and his answers are is that there's work that goes involved with this. Okay. This is not just something that you flip a switch and you're covered. This all takes time. You know, you living in Denmark, it says, how would you get from one place to another without transportation? Simple. Your country is known for more of a bicycle type situation anyway.
Yeah, or a horse.
There you go. How would you wash your clothes? Again, you are a survivalist. You prep. I'm sure you could figure out that as well. How would you wash your clothes? Do you have a washboard?
Well, no, but we have a creek not far away from here and a lot of stone.
There you go.
So there would be no problem.
You'd be amazed on what you can do with just stones and water and maybe a little bit of soap if you have the convenience of that.
Yeah.
The biggest question of all, how would you communicate with the rest of the world?
Well, I would do like the Indians did. I will make a big fire. And did you know what the first message from the Indians back in the days was when they were making the first smoke signal? You know what the message was?
What was that?
That was, help, help, my blanket is on fire.
little history joke there for you guys. But the smoke signals remind me of the story that I shared last night of the floods in Afghanistan, where villagers from other villages were firing their weapons to warn other villages of the coming flood, of the landslide. And I think in the future, if an EMP from a solar event or even a man-made EMP happened, I think the importance of, once everyone realizes what's happened, and it's going to be a while before the grid returns, if it ever does return, I think it's important to network immediately with nearby communities for situations like this, for communicating, to keep a daisy chain of communication from town to town, village to village, city to city. It's simple as this. It's good to have survival skills for yourself, but it's a cliche message, but we're going to have to learn how to work together if we're going to be able to face a situation where we're trying to make it after an EMP.
Yeah, and there is a big problem there because, now I have been listening to so many programs and seen so many stuff here and there about prepping, and that is one thing they never talk about, and that is all the people who cannot do, stuff like you and me and maybe a lot of other peoples are doing because they maybe have a handicap, they are sick, there
Right.
can be so many things wrong. There can be lonely people with diseases, and one thing I have learned from making radio for many years and making videos about cannabis is that I get a lot of messages from people always that don't want to be talked about in the radio or anything. They just want to say, hey, and I have this problem. I'm not good to walk, and what can I do? Is it good to do like this and that? So we gotta remember, and I'm sure a lot of those people are listening to this right now are maybe people who are not fit to do just, people always say, well, you got to prep, you got to do this and you got to do that. Well, that's so easy to say, but it's not easy to do for everybody. And we are all living in different places. Some are living in houses, some are living in big apartments, and everybody got to, prep in their own way. But of course, there is so many things we can do all together. We can all buy some food on can. We can all have some water and some camping equipment for fire and wood for so many things. But there are also so many other things we have to think about, and that is all the people who need the extra help. Who is going to help them?
Right. I like some of your answers. I asked you, what would you do if your credit cards and ATM were no longer working, and you said you have cannabis, and that's a big point that I want to bring up too, is trade in the future. And it's, if you're just tuning in, you're thinking, what in the hell is this guy talking about? Power grids going down, talking about trading plants for other goods. But guys, in 1859, had we been wired up the way we are now, back then we were on
The
1859.
Carrington.
Yeah. Think about the damage that would have happened.
Yeah, and how many extra people we are today.
Yeah. The population is a lot bigger. And reading this, some of the stuff takes me back. I haven't heard the story in a while. On that morning, he was capturing the likeness of an enormous group of sunspots. He's talking about Mr. Carrington here. Suddenly before his eyes, two brilliant beads of blinding white light appeared over the sunspots, intensified rapidly, and became kidney-shaped. Realizing that he was witnessing something unprecedented, and being somewhat flurried by the surprise, Carrington later wrote, I hastily ran to call someone to witness the exhibition with me. On returning within 60 seconds, I was mortified to find it was already much changed and enfeebled. He and the witness watched the white spots contract to mere pinpoints and disappear. That says it was 11:23 a.m. Only 5 minutes had passed just before dawn the next day. The skies all over planet Earth erupted in red, green, and purple auroras, so brilliant that newspapers could be read easily as in daylight. Indeed, stunning auroras pulsated even at near tropical latitudes over Cuba, the Bahamas, Jamaica, and El Salvador, and Hawaii. Even more disconcerting telegraph systems worldwide went haywire, sparked discharges, shocking the telegraph operators and setting telegraph paper on fire. Even when the telegraphers disconnected the battery power lines, the aurora-induced electric currents in the wires still allowed messages to be transmitted. So, thinking about what happened then in 1859 and what would happen right now. Well, first of all, we have a lot more equipment in space monitoring the situation, but still, is there anything is it possible to have a Faraday cage on standby with all of your electronics that you value the most easily to be accessed and grabbed and thrown into this? Because in just 5 minutes, this event had rapidly changed. You know, he had been monitoring sunspots before. He knows it takes time for these changes to take place. And it properly describes he was mortified to find how much it changed in the 5 minutes instead of watching it all the way through. So I'm just asking you, really, even if you had a Faraday cage, is there enough time for people to be that sharp thinking and grab those things and throw them into that cage before everything gets affected?
I don't think so. No
What's
way.
that? Well, I mean, Mari says you can use the microwave as a Faraday cage, and that's true too. But I guess what I'm seeking is by the time most people find out that this event's going to happen, let's just say we do have an early detection system that picks this up and it gives us a half hour. What happens if you get the alert late? 5 minutes. I think
and people are so occupied of anything else, you know, they got to have the message from somewhere, but who will give it to them?
Well, I mean, especially if we're talking about EMP, and let's just say the grid goes down and it goes down, what good is this technology going to be? Now, there's going to be people out there that say, well, what about the future when we get the grid back up? Those pieces of technology will be very important if they're still intact. And that's very true. And that would be about the only reason that you would want to keep electronics past a situation like a Carrington event. So my suggestion, honestly, stuff like hard drives, backup disks, whatever, already have a Faraday cage with those important electronics with data and information that could be retrieved if and when the grid does come back. So instead of just waiting to the last minute, I think you should think alike that we're going to have to learn new techniques without a power grid. So we have to condense what we actually save from an event like that. Am I making any sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
It's like the grandparents say when they're getting ready to pass away and they've got all this money. I can't take it with me. So they use it the best way they can while they can still use it. And the rest is history. And that's pretty much what we have to come to grips with. A society that is so addicted to the technology that we have today. I know when we go camping or in an area that doesn't have very good signal, now we know we don't have a signal, but yet we still pick up our phone to see if it might have come back. And that is part of an addictive part of technology. So I guess we have to be strong-minded when the lights do go out. We have to keep busy, I think. And in a world without a power grid, you're going to have to stay busy to survive anyway. So it's going to be hand in hand, I think. If you're busy, if you're working towards making a new life, adapting to the conditions that have been given to you, then the addiction to technology hopefully fades away. And since we're kind of talking about technology, Mari and I had interviewed, and by the way, I'll leave the link to this article on EMPs as well. There's a book out there that is absolutely the best when it comes for prepping. And this website here calls it the Bible for emergency prep and survival. And like I said, this guy, we've talked about Matthew Stein in other episodes. The book really goes for any kind of prep, not just for global cooling, but everything, every kind of disaster, from food prep to water, you name it. This guy covers it. And why am I talking about? I'm not trying to make this guy rich. I'm not trying to promote his book for him so he has money in his pocket. I'm recommending this book while I can, because right now I'm speaking to you through the internet and electricity and our power grid's still up. So while we still have these things to our, for our ability to do what we do, I want to make sure I share certain things like these books right here. Owning books like this in your home is going to make a difference for you and your family in the future when a power grid event does go down. We saw that blackout a few years ago in New York City. Kind of scared people a little bit. Everybody thought it was a terror attack. Does anybody in the chat, ask anybody in the chat if they remember back in 2000, I think it was 2003 when New York City had the blackout. Do you remember what it was for?
I don't. I remember when it happened. I don't remember exactly what caused it. I believe it may have been a heat wave which overpowered the grid. There was rolling blackouts from California to New York at the time, if I recall correctly. I don't see anyone in the chat really talking about that quite yet. They are sharing, just prepping information about Faraday cages. Rain has a few ham radios, just talking about prepping right now.
Very good. I'm glad you mentioned ham radios. Mari also has quite the collection as well. And I think those are going to be important. I think those are some of the things that need to be thrown into your Faraday cages.
We were talking about having maps ready, knowing your resources, hunting stores, even Walmart has atlases that you can get that scope out the terrain, maps out the area, shows you your rivers, your ponds, what kind of fish are in the rivers and ponds and lakes. And, it's, make sure you have that just on hand. You just never know. It's better to be prepared and have those simple items than not to have them.
Yeah, I think some of these channels that sell these 2 weeks worth of food with a 25-year shelf life to it. I don't know about you, Henrik, but I think we're going to need to have more than 2 weeks worth of food on the shelf when we do experience power failures due to solar activity or even a man-made event.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I can also say that now you were talking about a book that on Sunday, this is now at 8 o'clock, there is starting a show on the Weather Channel on YouTube called SOS How to Survive. And they are also coming around everything from drought to snow and how to make everything out of nothing, So just a little information to people if they also want the visual, instead of only books and text all the time. Then there is, as I said, the program SOS How to Survive on the Weather Channel on YouTube, and it's starting tonight at 8 o'clock. And I'm not promoting anything else, for making any money off them.
Well, the Weather Channel is kind of that's a tough pill to swallow. Unfortunately, it's one of the few media sources for weather. Now, I don't know what you have to watch for weather in your country, or if you have a Weather Channel or just a different source, but we have Weather Nation that we watch over Weather Channel and AccuSource Weather. So I know you're not promoting Weather Channel because Weather Channel promotes the man-made global warming as many times as they can.
But I just thought that, because I'm that kind of guy, just because somebody is saying something that's not right, and then the other thing they can say is all right. And they are not like the people you are talking about, because I hate people who are making other people down when they are sick, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the Weather Channel is not like that, and I just saw the trailers for the programs, and I just thought that would be a very good idea to get new ideas from, also because we have to look in every direction,
Yep. Yeah, and we can still find golden nuggets because there's been plenty of times where I'll give the Weather Channel credit. It doesn't matter what they believe, what caused the weather. When they cover a winter storm like they did with Winter Storm Riley and these nor'easters and the hurricanes, top-notch coverage by any Weather Channel out there. I mean, these guys are on the ball. And you're right, just because there's some things that we don't always agree with doesn't mean we can't find a diamond in the rough every once in a while from these sources. And I know AccuWeather actually was the first of the major weather channels to actually come out and say that volcanoes benefit our planet as they are creating cooling effect in the atmosphere. And my mouth hit the ground when I saw that. I couldn't believe that AccuSource actually admitted that volcano activity was cooling our planet. So that's encouraging to see a mainstream media network like that taking a step. That's huge. And a lot of people probably weren't paying attention to that because it was one of those side articles that was, tucked away, not in the mainstream part of the headlines.
Yeah, I have a wish for you for some time in the future where we could make a program where people could not only be within the chat, but also could talk to us directly, and come with their questions, because I think that a lot of people would like to come with their questions. It's not everybody who's good to typing in the chat, if they have to listen to the program at the same time.
That is an option that Mari and I actually have discussed, and we would love to find a way to do that. There are a couple different services.
We can do a call-in show. My concern are trolls dealing with that, but I mean, if we brace people for the trolls, I guess we could handle it and just click, block them eventually. I don't know. It's a little tricky on YouTube with that live. The thing is live, so of course something like that, it's going to be, you never know how it is. But there are a few platforms that we've looked at for call-in live shows. Doing it here on YouTube is possible through Skype. I could just put a Skype thing out, have people ring in, and it's like Russian roulette, really, with it. But I think it'd be really beneficial because these people in the chat, they're sharing information. Like we got Starman's even staying up late here for us. Pam is one of our Pam is one of our newer viewers. They're talking about just simple things that people can have on hand to prep. Things like lighters, fish hooks, just ham radios, simple ham radios. They're sharing all kinds of different information. Rain just put a pellet rifle, there's so many little things that people can gather that are very inexpensive to do prepping. I know ourselves, like we have 5-gallon buckets of like rice and beans and that kind of stuff just to have on hand. John Casey, when we first interviewed him, he recommended that everyone have at least a year's supply of food. And it is done. If you don't have to do it all at once, but just start doing it little by little. Starting is the hardest part. And once you start that, it'll just sort of, you'll start acclimating things day by day, week by week, month by month. It'll add up and you'll have a good, comfortable supply. And, it's just peace of mind. It's a scary topic to take hold. And having that peace of mind, I'd rather be a person that has that stuff than doesn't and is prepared for anything. And that's the key, having the right mindset, not doing it out of fear, but doing it because you're being smart and you want to be prepared for everything.
Again, I kind of want to install these talks tonight, like the puke play. When we come across this situation, we're going to be ready for it. We're going to collect all those thoughts that we've had and the information that we've learned about prepping from not just this channel, but other channels, and put things together. And, I think the information, for the most part, about the basic science on the grand solar minimum is pretty solid for a lot of these other channels. And, people ask me all the time, what can we look at as a basic book or some kind of guide to help explain the average person about solar cycles, cosmic rays, solar maximums, solar minimums. And Henrik, you brought this to me a few weeks ago. Mari has also shown me this in the past as well. But this is abruptearthchanges.com. Sasha Dobler, we interviewed him many months ago, and we praised him on the interview about how we appreciated him taking the time to put this article together, this ebook, I should say. But when you shared this with me a couple of weeks ago, Henrik, what was your main thinking about, what was, and I apologize because I get links from you all the time and I don't always catch them in time. It's been kind of busy around here the last few weeks, but the mindset that you were having when you sent me this.
Well, I cannot actually see what it is.
I'm
you
sorry.
are having
It
up.
was it was the ebook by Sasha Dobler talking about all the cycles, the solar maximums, the solar minimums. Really?
Oh, yes. I thought it would be a very good introduction to everybody who have any kind of answer or questions, of course, sorry, to exactly what's about the grand solar minimum. It was so well written, I think.
No, and you're right. This is probably the best basic explanation that's detailed enough and in layman's terms enough for anyone who is new to this topic. But I'm glad, I saw this today and I thought, well, Henrik and I were going to talk about solutions, questions that we're going to have about disasters, and then, of course, that reference for what can we expect from the grand solar minimum? What is the grand solar minimum? And we've talked about that several times. So tonight was just an idea of a discussion to lay out a foundation for you. Talk about some of the things that we're going to do. Henrik, that's another thing. You and David post very great videos about your gardens. And I asked a question the other day in the GSM chat, but I can tell you guys take extreme pride in your work. And I guess my question is, how long have you been gardening? Is this something that you just recently picked up, or is this something that's been a passion of yours all your life?
Oh, I have always loved to do stuff in the garden. My great grandparents came from Holland to Denmark to teach people to grow vegetables. So we were one of the first people that was invited from the Danish government to come to Denmark, back in the times. So I just think it's in my genes somehow.
As many of you know, we're in the middle of in the move.
Of course, it's life. It gives you so many things.
Well, that's the thing. I can't wait until we get settled with our move, because Mari and I have talked about growing and indoor growing as well. And I never really thought about this, but I think growing could be also stimulating. And I could see where the pride comes in as you are yielding the benefits from your crop, your small crop, no matter how little it may be. Each year that goes by in practice of growing, you try to perfect a method each year. Maybe you change something, or maybe you have a way of doing things you've done all your life, and you've done it for so long that it's like riding a bike. But it amazes me when I see your videos, and it's like when you go dig out potatoes in the ground, you know exactly where to go. Not everybody knows this stuff, and like you said earlier, not everybody has the cash available to do a proper, like, I've heard some outrageous ideas for prepping that cost thousands of dollars on other channels. I mean, if you got that kind of money, God bless you. But
Yeah.
the average working man does not have thousands of dollars sitting around waiting to be spent on a Tesla battery or whatever else idea that people think would be good to invest in, technical wise, when it comes to the grand solar minimum.
No. You know, I actually have a little bit of drought if you want it.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned the drought part, because here in this little introduction to the grand solar minimum, it talks about both flooding and droughts. In a grand solar minimum, cosmic rays trigger large flash floods, hailstorms due to jet stream disturbance and mixing of atmospheric layers. That sounds familiar. Local long duration precipitation events, atmospheric rivers, same thing. At the same time, as the increased local flooding events occur, more cloud cover and less sea surface water heating means less evaporation of seawater. Specific humidity is reduced. Overall rainfall amounts are reduced despite regional precipitation records and flooding. In general, water tends to remain in cloud coverage for longer durations. When clouds are rained out, this happens more violently, whereas irregular transport into the continents are diminished. As a result, in many areas, droughts are historically more prevalent during grand solar minima. So interesting. I'm glad this is a great introduction, and this is something you need to show even folks in the global warming side of this, because that's their number one go-to whenever they're talking about the temperatures not cooling. They talk about all the drought that happens. But now we have something to reference. Hey, take a look at this. This is a natural occurrence during these grand minimums. And it says here,
but the drought is going to be the worst thing for crop loss.
Yeah. Well, and eventually, when a drought, just depending on how long, and not just your crops, but your water supply could also get threatened as well, if it lasted long enough. I don't know if we lost Henrik or not. You still there, Henrik? We might be having some signal issues. You will have that. It is late at night for him, folks.
Hello?
I think we're having a little bit of connection issue.
I can hear you.
Okay. I couldn't hear you. So it might have been on my end.
I think there's some holes right now. It's a UFO.
I hear you fine. I don't think you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear now. But you was gone just for a second or two.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
So with all the information that we brought tonight, Henrik, I guess I was going to look at some weather tonight for the lower 48. And I'll just be frank with you folks. A lot of heat advisories, some flash flooding going on in Nevada, Four Corner regions, New Mexico and Colorado mostly. Some red flag warnings. So we do have some fire warnings out there as well. But other than that, it's pretty quiet for the U.S. We got some showers and thunderstorms across the Midwest right now. We got some rain earlier here in the Buffalo area, and hopefully that reduces temperatures. But other than that, guys, there's really nothing cooking in the oceans, nothing like that. But before we end tonight's broadcast, Henrik, I wanted to kind of give you the mic here and just kind of share with us. You know, you posted a video earlier in the week, and you had some concern in some of those things. And if you would, just go ahead and take a little time to kind of explain what your the meaning behind the video that you made about the questions that you had and everything.
Well, I think we have been it all through, more or less. It was just, I just think there is a lot more people out there who are trying to dissipate, or what should I call it, are willing to be a part of the community, but a lot of people don't know how to do it, And I think one of the strongest thing through the bad times that will come ahead will be the community, because if we are getting, bigger and bigger, and more are listening, and we are just getting bigger, then if we are having troubles in Denmark, maybe, then I can go a lot of other places. So many people have already said to me, you can come and live with me if there's problem, and I think a lot of other people can say the same to other, we can help each other in so many ways. And I want everybody to tell everybody about it, so we can be even bigger and help each other, because there is a lot of work to be done. And I know this is not going to be affecting me and you maybe in our lifetime as bad as we think, and maybe it's going to be even worse than we think. And you also got to ask yourself about the 2 million people in Japan. How many of those do you think was ready for what was happening? And you can prep all you want from now on, and if you are using a lot of time to prepping, and you have been bought a lot of stuff, and you have been doing so many things, and the next minute you will be hit like rain in Japan, and everything you have done is just being washed away.
That's a good point you bring up too, because somebody commented on the video where we talked about where to go during a grand solar minimum, where would be the safest place to live. And we had somebody comment stating that really the best way to do this is if we do run into a grid failure type situation and we get thrown in the dark ages, the best way to be ready is to be ready to be mobile, to have something like a bug out bag to where you can grab and go. Because like you just said right there about the flash floods, everything that you could have worked for, unless you're in a secure location where you're not going to deal with flash flooding, heavy prepping would be suggested. A fire would wipe it out just as easy. But the point I think Henrik and I are trying to make is that I really think you have to find out what works best for you and your location and what you're good at as far as survival skills. But I'm going to go with a mobile type bug out bag, and hope that the prepping supplies that I do have makes through whatever kind of situation, whether it be a natural disaster, flooding, snow event, whatever. But I think that's something that needs to be thought about as well, is that as nice as it would be to be totally prepared for a new challenging situation like a power grid going down and trying to stay warm in the cold winter with no power. I know once we get settled in our new home, we'll be able to make more homesteading videos for the Patreon. And we want to talk about things like terracotta candles, minor things that could keep smaller rooms warm responsibly, because we've also seen some horrific video footage of people maybe going a little too far with these terracotta candles and burning down boats, houses, camping areas, whatever. So, over the next several weeks, we hope to have more research on stuff like that and to make more videos that go along the lines of basically how to be a nature's version of MacGyver. It's important that we learn these skills. Once again, if you've been away from camping and that type of mentality of survival skills, it might be time to start, treating it as maybe as a family outing for the weekend. But it wouldn't be a bad idea for folks to get out there and do some camping in the woods and starting your own fires, and how to put them out the right way, and maybe an area where you can fish. And hopefully you remember it as a kid when you used to gut your own fish and fry them over the fire back when you were younger. A lot of that stuff doesn't leave your mind, but you know make it fun. If you want, make it a family vacation and make it educational. I tell you what, we have two children, 8 and 10 years old, and I know both of them are really into science. They like the outdoors. One remembered a science project that he did a year ago in a Buffalo science class at the Science Museum. And, kids absorb this stuff really good, especially if you can find a way to make it fun. And I think that's what it really comes down to is, we have to start getting our children ready. We have to go back to the old days of taking them camping for a few weeks of the summer, teaching them things like fishing. Henrik, you said you hunt. I'm screwed in that
No,
department.
no, 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 no. I'm absolutely not hunted. I have never killed an animal in my life. But if I had to, well, then I will find out a way to do it, of course. But I will absolutely not love it. I would hate it.
I'm in the same boat you are. I've never hunted in my life. I've never went for fun or for food. So, but that's something that, you know, if it comes down to
Yeah,
that,
that's you also got to remember that if there is a lot of it don't have to be the weather that will force people to do
right.
stuff free. You know, if there's a crop loss everywhere in the world and everything is going into a panic state, you know, then you also have to think about, well, what the fuck do I do now?
I'll tell you, you have to pay attention to these food recalls on top of some crop loss throughout the world, some produce in certain grocery stores in parts of the country. Here in the US and UK look a little skimpy. They don't look as luscious as they has in the past. So, yeah, you're right. It's just more than just weather, but when the crop loss becomes widespread, or let's just say that there's a certain specific disaster that wipes out a main artery for transportation for food to be distributed, things like that.
Yeah, and oh my God, you know, I've totally forgot to tell you the most important thing. You know, eggs is always, if you had chickens, you know, you always have chicken meat and eggs. But you know what? I have big snails, you know, from Africa. That's going to be very, very big snails, you know. And yesterday it was Lily's birthday, and I just want to say happy 8. And you know what? My snail lay 5 eggs yesterday, and I'm gonna call them all Lily.
We'll let her know about that, and we really appreciate too. We had a lot of birthday love for Lily. Look, and like I said, these kids at this age, if you make it fun for them, they'll soak it in like sponges. Lily's been wanting to do an introduction for our show. My son Aiden also would like to, so I'm sure in the near future we'll hear his introduction as well. But these kids are interested in science, and
Don't you just wish you were 8 again?
Oh man, I'd love it. I mean, I wish all I had to worry about was coloring and playing with my Transformers and Legos and video games. That would be great right now.
Oh
Unfortunately,
yeah.
we have a much bigger job, and that is getting these kids ready for a potential future situation. And we're not raising them on fear or panic. We do family things together that don't always require technology. And like I said, once we get settled, a garden will be out back, a garden will be indoors. Our children will be participating in everything that happens in this garden. And we're not going to look at it as Mari and I just trying to see what we can grow, but we're going to also educate our children because they're the ones that are going to benefit the most from this. I doubt Mari and I or yourself are really going to see the major effects from this next coming cycle, but I do believe that we will witness some unprecedented weather events, volcano eruptions, and earthquakes within the next 15 to 20 years. I can almost guarantee that.
Oh yes, and again, a strange weather nobody can predict.
No. And again, I think tonight's discussion, I hope people listen to this, maybe listen to it a couple different times, maybe think of things that we didn't think of and add it to the comment section. Henrik, great idea. We will begin working on a way to do a call-in show in the near future. Maybe we can get a panel of people involved with that. But for the meantime, Mari, myself, and Henrik, we could field the first show. And throughout the future, maybe we'll find other guests to join us as well to be part of the answering panel.
I don't get why it's so difficult to block people, you know, because when I was making radio in the old days, you know, even then there were trolls, you know, and we only had maybe 4 or 5 telephone lines. And as soon as, you know, you heard there was a troll on, you know, you just plucked the button, you know, and then the person was gone. And then you was just laughing, you know, because, he was an idiot, you know. Hello, who's next?
Right. And that's what we could do, you know, like, wow, the ignorance and the IQ levels are really going to be showing through the immaturity of the ad hominem attacks that we're already used to for covering this topic, Henrik. So it should be fun nonetheless, and that's a great idea. And Mari and I were actually talking about doing this months ago as well, but with a lot of things happening in our lives, personal lives, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we present a show at least 4 times a week on our channel because it's important to us that the truth gets out there, that people know exactly where to go to look for the actual data and the facts about what's happening on this planet. Cooling, warming, flooding, droughts, whatever. we're going to present the truth, whether it follows our agenda lines or not. You know, even if I get this crazy whack temperature anomaly increase, what if we go over the 1 degree Celsius warming for some reason? That's going to be covered. It will be talked about. We'll also do research and look back and see if we ever had a time where we saw anomalies like this. Another thing that was pointed out today from Rob about these warmer temperatures in the Arctic in the wintertime and cooler summers, those are bad. Warmer temperatures obviously hold more moisture in the air, which means more what in the wintertime? Snow. And Greenland right now is almost 100% covered in snow. I talked about this yesterday. Rob also talked to me about it today, how Greenland is the one place on this planet right now that has the most snowfall lying on the ground right now. And it really didn't hit me until looking at it at the map that he presented it to me. And I'm like, wow. I mean, it's July 14th. There's some melting that happens on the coast, and it's nearly 100% covered in snow. I was also told that this coming week that Greenland is expecting 15 feet of snow in the upcoming week. Now, I haven't vetted it yet, but that's just the report. So I will continue to look into that. But could you imagine 15 feet of snow coming to one region in the northern hemisphere during the summer months?
Oh, that's a lot, and I think they already say it's Greenland the year without a summer.
Yeah. Well, and just by looking at the breeding season of some of the shorebirds there, that's how you can, one way to identify if you're blind and you can't see the snowfall everywhere. I guess that'd be the other way to determine that we're having some snow issues, is the breeding, the migrating has not happened properly like it has in the past. I shared that story last night. All right, so before we go, we always have this section where Henrik somehow achieves scaring away about 20 to 30 viewers at the very end of the show. So do you have any of those nuggets tonight for us, Henrik? Anything odd happened to you over the last week or so?
No, not really. But
oh my gosh.
something weird happened to me back in 1997, you know, and it's just to tell people a brief short story about how you can be 30 years old and running your bike, you know, and the next second, you know, you are lying in the pavement and are dead, you know, and you would never imagine it happened, you know. I was riding my bike in 1997 in Denmark. I was going from one city to another, and it was a hot summer day, so I have sandals on my shoe. One of those where the sandals are open, so you can see the toes on your foot, you know. And I was standing up over this hill we have in Copenhagen. And because I'm a little guy, you know, I was standing up on my bike, and I was Lance Armstrong, you know, I should just over the hill as fast as I could. And then my chain broke, and I was hammering my foot down in the pavement, and the asphalt was taking all the flesh off my big toe. So you could see the nerves down in my big toe. And when that happens, you know, your body goes in shock. And I didn't know that, because I was just laying down, you know, and I felt like shit, you know. I thought, what the fuck is going on with my foot, you know, and the blood was flushing out, you know. And then the next minute, you know, I was seeing myself from above, you know, and I was seeing people were standing over me, and people were stopping, and cars and everything. And there was a lot of people, and I could see them punching at my heart, you know. They were feeling my pulse, and my heart was not beating, you know. And then the next minute, you know, I was just gone, you know. Everything was black, and then poof, I was in this tunnel, you know. A lot of people have talked about, you know, and I can remember it as it was from 1 hour ago, you know. It was so strange. The first thing I was thinking about was, fuck the speed of light. What is this? How can anything move so fast? You know, speed of light was standing still, you know. It was going so crazy fast, you know.
Wow.
And it was like I knew everything. If you have asked me anything, I could tell you exactly what was going on. And I have absolutely no memory of my life on Earth or my girlfriend or anything at all. It was just light, you know, and it was not, for me, it was not God. It was not Jesus. was pure light and consciousness. And then, I was tolling through the end of this tunnel, and the light was getting brighter, and everything was so fantastic. And it was the best thing I have ever tried in my whole life. And I just knew I had to go into the light. And then a fragment before I was going into the light, I heard my ex-girlfriend yelling, Heinrich, you are not doing this to me. And when she said that, I was turning right into the black tunnel, and I was just staring up in her eyes, and I was just shouting at her, why the fuck are you shouting at me? Because she was shouting, Henrik, don't do this to me. And I was so mad, and it changed my life in so many ways. And my ex-girlfriend and me, we were never discussing the accident, and I've never talked about it. Maybe a year or 2 years ago, I was beginning to talk a little bit about it with my girlfriend, because it was my story, and I think it was weird, and I think, people were not understanding because that's God. I heard so many stories about people who have been in near deaths, and everybody's talking about the light as God and Jesus. And well, that was not what I was experiencing, but it changed my life in many, many ways.
Yeah, that experience, I thought there for a minute we were talking about dropping LSD, some of the things that you were describing there for a minute, the sensations, but I could see how that would change your perception on a lot of things. And I can't imagine remembering some of the detail that you remember. That's something that sticks with you. So I don't blame you for not really discussing it very much. But you were talking about things of euphoria and light and consciousness, and that's the only reason why I made the joke reference of dropping LSD. It's almost kind of the same thing, so it kind of makes you wonder.
I've never tried LSD, so I don't know.
Or shrooms or mushrooms, if anyone's ever
No,
had.
I've never tried that.
Well,
I'm so boring, No, I've never tried. I've tried cannabis, and that's all. I'm so control freak, so I will not dare to take anything. I will not control myself, never.
That euphoric feeling, I know exactly. So I had a similar experience, not so violent sounding, but that euphoria I attribute to some type of spiritual awakening or journey. And I can't really say more than that. I'm not sure what that is, but I've had a similar experience to that. Now, on the lighter note, Starman said, "What a way to trim your toenails." With lots of
I have so many problems. It was back in 1997, and I still have so many problems with that toe because they could not fix it right at the time, because it's so difficult when your nerves are blooded in your foot.
Yeah.
There are so many nerves, and they don't want to touch the nerves in your foot because, so many things are connected down there.
Well, that's insane. I hope nobody ever has to go through that experience, and leave it to Starman figuring out the lighter side of getting your toenails trimmed. Apparently,
I'm trimming it myself. No doctors will ever touch my toe again. I promise you that.
I bet. Well, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Mari, how was everybody in the chat? Did we have a good night with the folks that tuned in for our show?
We just have, I can't explain what a loving, wonderful group of just compassionate people we have. We're so fortunate to be a part of this community. And I was just telling people in the chat, it's very humbling for me to be a part of this community. And I told our viewers in the chat, they are the heart and soul of this channel.
As well as people that contribute, but also people who just watch this channel and just comment. That may mean nothing to you, but means good or bad. It still means good things for us because we're starting to get people to think, and we hope that we are also helping spreading the message. Henrik, would you like to add anything before we close out tonight's broadcast?
No, you just told me to go to bed, so I'm quiet.
All right. Well, go to bed. Guys, thanks for tuning in to the Grand Solo Minimum channel. Henrik, we have to have another talk like this probably in a couple more weeks or so. It's not a bad idea to bring this kind of stuff up from time to time. So maybe in a few more weeks, we'll think of things that we wanted to talk about tonight that we didn't tonight. But this is definitely an important topic, and we'll also look into the call-in show idea. That was a really good idea as well.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, thank you again for tuning in. Henrik, thank you very much for joining us again tonight.
You're so welcome.
All right. We'll talk soon, guys. Take care.